For decades, the house existed without suspicion, blending into the neighborhood as quietly as any other, its walls holding the familiar rhythms of ordinary family life. Curtains opened in the morning and closed at night. Lights flickered on in the evening and went dark before dawn. Neighbors passed by without slowing their steps, never imagining that inside this unremarkable structure, time had stopped in one hidden corner and never truly moved forward again. Nothing about the house suggested that a body had been concealed within it, that a life had ended there and been quietly absorbed into the architecture of daily existence. The family who lived there did not begin with the intention to hide a body for 30 years. No one plans a secret that long. What began instead was a single moment of violence, confusion, and fear, a moment that spiraled beyond control and forced an immediate decision that felt temporary at the time. The victim was not a stranger. They were someone known, someone who had entered the house without resistance, someone whose presence did not raise alarms. When the fatal moment occurred, it was sudden and irreversible, followed by silence so heavy it seemed to press against the walls themselves. In the aftermath, panic replaced reason. The family did not gather to form a careful plan. Each person reacted differently, driven by shock, loyalty, and the overwhelming fear of consequences. Calling authorities felt impossible, not because they failed to understand what had happened, but because they understood it too well. The thought of exposing the truth felt like a guarantee of destruction, not only of one life, but of the entire family structure that still existed above the body. And so, a decision was made, framed not as permanent concealment, but as delay, as buying time until something else became possible. The house itself offered opportunity. It had spaces that could be closed off, areas that did not require frequent access, places where something could remain unseen. At first, the body was hidden with the belief that this was temporary, that a solution would emerge. But days passed without discovery. Questions from outside were vague and easily dismissed. The absence of immediate consequences created a dangerous illusion, the sense that silence was working, that nothing had changed except what they refused to acknowledge. As weeks turned into months, the temporary became permanent by default. The family adapted in small ways, avoiding certain areas, adjusting routines, creating unspoken rules that governed movement through the house. Doors stayed locked. Storage spaces became forbidden. Children were instructed without explanation. Over time, these changes lost their connection to the original event and became part of the household's normal functioning. The secret was no longer something actively managed. It was something lived with. Life continued above the concealed space in ways that appeared completely ordinary. Meals were shared. Arguments happened and faded. Illnesses came and went. Holidays were celebrated, with decorations placed carefully, without ever disturbing what lay hidden beneath. The house absorbed these moments quietly, holding laughter and tension alike, while the body remained untouched, preserved not by intention, but by avoidance. Years passed, and with each year, the possibility of revealing the truth felt more distant. What might have been explained early as panic now felt too entrenched, too unforgivable. The family's internal logic shifted gradually. Right and wrong became less about morality and more about survival. The question was no longer whether hiding the body was wrong, but whether revealing it would destroy everything that remained of their lives. Silence became easier than confession, not because guilt disappeared, but because confronting it felt unbearable. Children grew up in the house sensing that something was wrong without ever being told what it was. They learned which questions not to ask, which spaces not to enter, Which topics caused adults to fall quiet? This unspoken education shaped them deeply, teaching them that reality could be divided, that some truths existed only as atmosphere. Silence, passed down this way, became generational. The house aged along with the family. Walls cracked, floors creaked. Systems failed and were repaired cautiously. Major renovations were postponed indefinitely. Contractors were avoided. The family became skilled at solving problems internally, at maintaining control over the environment. Every decision about the house passed through the same filter. Would this risk exposure? Over time, that question guided more choices than anyone cared to admit. The body itself became less a person and more a presence, an abstract, constant anchoring the family to a moment they could never escape. Memories of the victim blurred, reduced to fragments and impressions. What remained was not their life, but the fact of concealment itself. The body existed as proof of something that couldn't be undone, a physical reminder of fear made permanent. Decades passed this way, until the balance that had sustained the secret began to collapse under external pressure. Aging, health issues, financial strain, circumstances that could no longer be postponed, forced the family into a corner. An inspection became unavoidable. A repair required access to a space long avoided. The choice was no longer between confession and silence, but between intervention and inevitable discovery. When the concealed space was finally opened, there was no drama, no shouting, no sudden realization. The people involved already knew what would be found. The shock came not from discovery, but from confrontation, from seeing directly what had been held at a distance for so long. The body was still there, exactly where it had been left, preserved by isolation, untouched by the passage of everyday life above it. Authorities were contacted because there was no longer any alternative. When they arrived, they encountered a scene that defied simple explanation. An ordinary house, an ordinary family, and beneath it all, evidence of a crime hidden for 30 years. Investigators struggled not with facts, but with understanding how such a situation could persist without detection. There was no pattern of ongoing violence, no criminal lifestyle, only a single act, followed by decades of silence. Public reaction oscillated between disbelief and fascination. People searched for signs that must have been missed, clues that should have revealed the truth sooner. But the absence of those signs was precisely what made the case disturbing. There had been no visible breakdown, no outward marker of hidden horror. Life had continued, convincingly and consistently. For the family, exposure brought a strange sense of relief. The vigilance that had governed their lives was no longer necessary. The secret that had shaped every decision was now externalized, transferred to institutions designed to handle it. This relief did not erase fear or guilt, but it ended the suspended state they had endured for decades. Silence, once protective, had become exhausting. Legal consequences followed, complicated by time. Accountability was uneven, blurred by generational involvement and the passage of years. Punishment, where imposed, felt both inadequate and excessive, unable to fully reflect the moral complexity of the case. Justice arrived imperfectly, constrained by law's inability to address prolonged concealment in human terms. The victim's identity was restored publicly, their names spoken again after decades of absence. Though this acknowledgement could not restore what was lost, it shifted focus away from secrecy and back toward the life that had been taken. The victim was no longer an abstract presence, but a person, reintroduced into the narrative at the very end. Afterward, life did not return to normal. Relationships fractured, trust eroded. The shared secret that had once bound the family together dissolved, leaving behind isolation and unresolved emotion. The house itself was eventually emptied, altered, or removed entirely, but its transformation could not erase what had happened within it. The story does not end with closure. There is no moment of redemption that balances the years of concealment, no explanation that makes everything coherent. Instead, there is acknowledgement that fear, loyalty, and time can sustain realities no one ever intended to create. The family lived for 30 years, with a body hidden in their home, not because they planned to, but because each day made silence feel easier than breaking it. What remains most unsettling is not the act itself, but the duration. 30 years is long enough for lives to unfold, for generations to overlap, for memory itself to fade. That span of time, occupied by a secret hidden in plain sight, forces a reconsideration of how ordinary life and profound denial can coexist. The house no longer hides anything, but the implications remain, lingering as a reminder that the most disturbing truths are sometimes sustained, not by elaborate schemes, but by quiet routines repeated day after day, around something that should never have been allowed to remain unseen.